So tonight we're going to do something a little ambitious. We're going to tell the entire story of Greek mythology, all of it. From the very first spark of existence in a dark and formless void, all the way through to the fall of Troy and the long wandering journey home of one very tired Greek sailor. Every god, every monster, every hero who probably should have just stayed home. And we are going to do it all in the most calm and relaxing way possible. Because honestly, if ancient Greece could not give its people a good night of sleep, the least we can do is try. So settle in, get comfortable, pull that blanket up, let the pillow do its job, and let me take you back, way back, to the very beginning of everything, before there were stars, before there were mountains or oceans or people arguing about what to have for dinner. Before any of that, there was only one thing, and that thing was chaos. But before we get going, drop a comment and let me know what time you are watching this. Is it midnight? 2 in the morning? Whatever time it is, I hope this helps you drift off. And if you enjoy these videos, go ahead and hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel more than you would think. Alright, let's get into it. In the very beginning, there was nothing. Not darkness exactly, because darkness implies that light exists somewhere else. Not silence, because silence implies that sound is a thing that could happen. There was just chaos. And not the fun kind of chaos like a toddler with a permanent marker. This was the original formless void, a yawning gap of pure nothingness stretching in every direction forever. Now, the ancient Greeks did not sit around trying to explain this with particle physics. They did not have whiteboards and equations. They had stories. And according to those stories, chaos was less of a big explosion and more of a slow exhale. Out of this void, things just sort of appeared. Not with a bang, more like waking up on a lazy morning and realizing the world has quietly assembled itself around you while you were sleeping. The first beings to emerge were the primordial gods. Think of them less as gods in the way you might imagine Zeus sitting on a golden throne, and more as living forces of nature. They were the universe becoming aware of itself. First came Gaia, the earth. Not a woman standing on a hill somewhere. She was the hill. She was every hill. She was the ground beneath everything, the soil, the stone, the roots, the deep, warm core of the world itself. Gaia was the foundation upon which every other story would be built. Then came Tartarus, the deep pit beneath the earth. If Gaia was the floor, Tartarus was the basement, a dark, echoing abyss far below the surface where things that should not be remembered were kept. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and forget why you went in there? Tartarus is like that room, except it is infinite and full of imprisoned monsters. Next came Eros. Not the chubby baby with a bow and arrow you see on greeting cards. This Eros was something far older and stranger. Eros was the force of attraction itself, the pull that drew things together. Without Eros, nothing would have ever connected. No earth and sky, no gods and mortals, no awkward first dates at ancient Greek dinner parties. Eros was the reason anything bothered to exist alongside anything else. And then from the void came Erebus and Nyx. Erebus was darkness. Not just the absence of light, but a thick, tangible presence. The kind of darkness that feels like velvet pressing against your face. Nyx was night. She was shadow-given personality. And together these two became lovers because Greek mythology has a very relaxed policy on family dynamics. And honestly, we are just going to accept that and move on. Together, Erebus and Nyx produced ether, the bright upper air that the gods would eventually breathe, and Hemera, the day. So out of pure darkness came light, which is actually kind of poetic if you do not think about it too hard. And Nyx herself went on to bear some truly remarkable children. She gave birth to Thanatos, who was death, and his twin brother Hypnos, who was sleep, which means that right now, as you lie there with heavy eyelids, you are technically in the company of one of the oldest beings in Greek mythology. Hypnos was gentle. He was quiet. He drifted through the world on soft wings and touched the foreheads of mortals and gods alike. Even Zeus was not immune to his power. Sleep came for everyone eventually. Nyx also gave birth to the Fates, 3 sisters who controlled the destiny of every living being. Clotho spun the thread of life. Lachesis measured its length, and Atropos cut it. 3 quiet women with a spool of thread, deciding how long everyone got to live. No appeals, no negotiations. Even the gods could not overrule them. which is a remarkably democratic system for a mythology built almost entirely on nepotism and divine tantrums. She also bore Nemesis, the spirit of retribution, and the Hesperides, the nymphs of the evening, and Eris, the spirit of discord, who we will meet again much later at a very poorly planned wedding reception. Nyx was in many ways the most powerful deity in Greek mythology. Even Zeus was afraid of her. There is a story that says Zeus once wanted to punish Hypnos for putting him to sleep at an inconvenient moment. Hypnos ran to his mother and hid behind her robes. Zeus took one look at Nyx and decided it was not worth the trouble. Smart man. But the real action starts with Gaia, because Gaia, all on her own, produced Ouranos, the sky. He rose up above her, vast and starry and full of himself in more ways than one. Ouranos became the dome of the heavens, stretching over the earth like a ceiling made of midnight and constellations. And Gaia looked up at him and thought, yes, that will do. Together they would have children. Many, many children. And that is where things start to get complicated. Gaia and Ouranos had 12 children known as the Titans, and these were not small beings. Imagine figures so vast and so powerful that mountains were footstools and rivers were toys. The Titans were the first generation of gods proper, the rulers before the rulers, the rough draft before the final version. Among them were some names you might recognize. There was Kronos, the youngest and cleverest, who would eventually become very important and also very paranoid. There was Rhea, who would become his wife, and also the most patient mother in all of mythology. There was Oceanos, the great river that encircled the entire world, and his wife Tethys, mother of all rivers and springs. There were Hyperion and Theia, parents of the sun and the moon and the dawn. Mnemosyne, the embodiment of memory. Themis, the spirit of divine law, and several others whose names are slightly harder to pronounce after midnight. But Gaia and Ouranos did not only produce the Titans, they also had the Cyclopes, 3 massive one-eyed beings named Brontes, Sterops, and Arges. Thunder, lightning, and brightness. These were not the slow, dim-witted giants you might picture from later stories. These were master craftsmen, cosmic blacksmiths who would one day forge the most powerful weapons in existence. But for now they were just babies, very large one-eyed babies. And then came the Hecatonkers, 3 beings each with 50 heads and 100 arms. Let me say that again, 50 heads, 100 arms. Try to picture that for a moment and then stop, because it is genuinely unsettling. Their names were Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges, and they were strong beyond description, strong enough to throw mountains like pebbles, strong enough to shake the foundations of the world. Now here is the thing about Ouranos. He looked at his children, specifically the Cyclopes and the Hecatonkers, and he did not feel pride. He felt disgust. They were too strange, too powerful, too different from what he thought children should look like. So he did what any deeply insecure cosmic deity would do. He shoved them back into Gaia. Literally. He imprisoned them deep inside the earth in the darkness of Tartarus and refused to let them see the light. Gaia, as you might imagine, was not pleased. Carrying imprisoned children inside you for all eternity tends to put a strain on any relationship. She was in pain. She was furious. And she was forming a plan. Gaia fashioned a great sickle from grey adamant, a metal harder than anything in creation. She called her Titan children together and asked a simple question. Which one of you is brave enough to stand against your father? Most of them stayed silent. Can you blame them? Ouranos was the sky. He was literally everywhere above them, watching, pressing down. But Kronos, the youngest, stepped forward. Maybe he was the bravest. Maybe he was the most ambitious. Maybe he just really did not like his dad. Whatever the reason, he took the sickle and he waited. That night, when Ouranos came down to embrace Gaia, as he did every evening, Kronos struck. He castrated his father with the sickle and threw the severed pieces into the sea. Ouranos screamed and recoiled, pulling away from the earth forever. The sky separated from the ground, and from that moment on, there was space between heaven and earth. A gap, room to breathe, room for a world to exist. From the blood that fell upon the earth sprang the giants, the Erinyes, who were the Furies, spirits of vengeance, and the Meliae, the ash-tree nymphs. And from the foam where the severed parts met the sea, something else rose. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty born from violence and ocean spray. which is about as Greek as it gets. Uranos cursed Kronos as he retreated into the heavens forever. He warned him that one day his own children would overthrow him just as he had overthrown his father. Kronos heard the prophecy, filed it away, and then promptly decided to become king of the universe, because surely a curse like that could not possibly come true. Right. Kronos took the throne. He married his sister Rhea, because again, Greek mythology, and together they ruled over what the ancient poets called the Golden Age, a time of peace and plenty. Mortals lived without toil or sorrow. The earth gave food freely. Fruit fell from the trees without anyone having to climb. Rivers ran with milk and honey, which sounds lovely until you think about the hygiene implications. No one grew old or sick. There were no laws because no one did anything wrong. It was paradise. Or at least the memory of paradise, which is often better than the real thing. Imagine that for a moment. A world without alarm clocks, without deadlines, without anyone sending you a message that says we need to talk. Just warm days and gentle nights and food that grows itself. The ancient Greeks looked back at the Golden Age the way we look back at summer holidays from childhood. A time that probably was not as perfect as we remember, but the memory itself is perfect, and maybe that is what matters. But Kronos could not enjoy it. That curse echoed in the back of his mind every single day like a song stuck on repeat. One of your children will overthrow you. So Kronos became paranoid. He started seeing threats everywhere. He could not look at a child without wondering if this was the one who would end him. And when Rhea gave birth to their first child, Hestia, goddess of the hearth, a quiet, gentle soul who wanted nothing more than to tend fires and bring warmth to homes, Kronos did something unthinkable. He swallowed her, whole, just opened his mouth and down she went. Rhea was horrified. She screamed, she begged. But what could she do? Kronos was the king of the Titans, the ruler of the universe. When their next child Demeter was born, he swallowed her too. Then Hera, then Hades, then Poseidon, 5 children, 5 swallowings. Each time Rhea went through the joy of birth and the agony of loss in the same moment. Each time she held her newborn just long enough to feel the warmth of its skin before it was taken. 5 times she heard her baby cry. 5 times the crying stopped. Try to imagine that grief. Not once, but 5 times. The same hope, the same devastation, the same monstrous husband reaching out his hand. It is one of the cruelest images in Greek mythology, and Greek mythology has quite a lot of competition in that department. When she became pregnant for the 6th time, Rhea decided enough was enough. She went to Gaia, her mother, the earth itself, and asked for help. And Gaia, who knew a thing or two about terrible husbands, had a plan. When the 6th child was born on the island of Crete, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and presented it to Kronos. He grabbed it and swallowed it without even looking, which honestly says a lot about his parenting style. Meanwhile, the real baby was spirited away to a hidden cave on Mount Ida in Crete, where he was raised in secret by nymphs and fed on the milk of a divine goat named Amalthea. That baby was Zeus, and he was going to change everything. Zeus grew up hidden from his father, raised in that quiet cave, surrounded by the sounds of the Cretan wilderness. When he was old enough and strong enough, he set his plan in motion. With the help of the Titaness Meti, who was wise beyond measure, Zeus disguised himself and approached Kronos. He slipped a potion into his father's drink, and Kronos, who apparently never learned to be cautious about what he consumed, drank it. What followed was not pleasant. Kronos vomited up everything he had swallowed. First the stone, which Zeus later placed at Delphi as a monument. Then one by one, his children emerged. Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, Hestia, all of them fully grown, all of them very much alive, and all of them very, very angry. Zeus freed his siblings, and together they declared war on Kronos and the Titans. This was the Titanomachy, a war that lasted 10 years and shook the very structure of the cosmos. Mountains crumbled, the sea boiled, the sky cracked open like old plaster. But Zeus was clever. He descended into Tartarus and freed the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncères whom Kronos had kept imprisoned just as their father Ouranos had done before him. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged 3 mighty weapons. For Zeus, they made the thunderbolt, a weapon of pure, devastating lightning. For Poseidon, they forged the trident, a 3-pronged spear that could shake the earth and command the seas. And for Hades, they crafted the Helm of Darkness, a cap of invisibility that allowed its wearer to move unseen. With these weapons and the 100-handed giants hurling mountains at the Titans, the war turned. The Olympians, as Zeus and his siblings came to be known, won. The Titans were defeated and most of them were cast into Tartarus, locked away in the same dark pit where they had once imprisoned others. The Hecatonkers stood guard over them for all eternity. Kronos fell. The age of the Titans ended, and the age of the Olympians began. After the war, the three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, drew lots to divide the world between them. Zeus won the sky and became king of the gods. Poseidon took the sea and all its depths. Hades received the underworld, the realm of the dead. The earth and Mount Olympus were shared among all. Now, if you are lying there thinking that seems like Hades got a raw deal, you are not wrong. The underworld was dark, cold, and full of dead people. Not exactly a vacation destination. But Hades accepted his lot without complaint, which honestly makes him one of the more reasonable figures in this entire mythology. Zeus settled on Mount Olympus, the highest peak in Greece, and established his court. Around him gathered the 12 Olympian gods, though the exact list varies depending on who you ask. Generally, the lineup included Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Hermes, and either Hestia or Dionysus depending on the century and who was telling the story. Each god had a domain, a personality, a set of very specific grudges, and together they ruled the world from their misty mountaintop, eating ambrosia, drinking nectar, and meddling in human affairs with the casual indifference of someone scrolling through their phone. Let us meet them. Zeus was the king, god of the sky, thunder, lightning, law, and order. He carried his thunderbolt like a scepter, and his temper was legendary. He was powerful, commanding, and had an unfortunate habit of falling in love with just about everyone he met, mortal or immortal, which caused endless problems. His wife Hera, goddess of marriage and family, spent most of her time not punishing Zeus for his wandering eye, but punishing the women he pursued, which is unfair but extremely on-brand for Greek mythology. Hera was proud, fierce, and unforgiving. She was the protector of marriage and yet trapped in the most dysfunctional one imaginable. She sent monsters after the lovers of Zeus. She cursed their children. She once drove Heracles, the most famous son of Zeus, temporarily insane out of sheer spite. And yet she was also the queen of heaven, regal and powerful and deeply respected. Complex does not begin to describe her. Poseidon ruled the seas from a palace of coral and pearl deep beneath the waves. He was moody, temperamental, and prone to shaking the earth when he got upset, which earned him the title Earthshaker. Sailors prayed to him before every voyage, and with good reason. A calm sea meant Poseidon was happy. A storm meant he was not. Simple as that. Athena was the goddess of wisdom, warfare, and crafts. She was born in the most dramatic way possible, springing fully grown and fully armoured from the head of Zeus after he swallowed her mother Metis. Which, yes, is deeply ironic given what Kronos had done. Athena was calm, strategic, and ruthlessly intelligent. She did not fight for the joy of battle. She fought to win. She was the patron goddess of Athens and the favourite child of Zeus, which annoyed basically everyone else on Olympus. Apollo was the god of the sun, music, poetry, prophecy, healing, and plague. Yes, both healing and plague. The Greeks were not big on internal consistency. Apollo was golden and beautiful and talented at everything, which made him both beloved and insufferable depending on your perspective. He drove the chariot of the sun across the sky each day, and his oracle at Delphi was the most sacred prophetic site in the ancient world. His twin sister Artemis was the goddess of the hunt, the moon, and the wilderness. She roamed the forests with her band of nymphs, bow in hand, and had absolutely no interest in romance or marriage. She was fiercely independent, protective of young women, and not someone you wanted to offend. One man who accidentally saw her bathing was turned into a deer and torn apart by his own hunting dogs. The lesson being, always knock. Ares was the god of war, but not the noble, strategic kind. He was the god of bloodlust, violence, and the ugly, chaotic side of battle. Almost nobody liked him. Even his own parents thought he was difficult. He was loud, brutal, and constantly getting into fights he did not always win. His affair with Aphrodite while she was married to Hephaestus was one of the most famous scandals on Olympus. Aphrodite, born from sea foam and older than most of the Olympians, was the goddess of love, beauty and desire. She was irresistible, and she knew it. Her magic girdle could make anyone fall in love, and she wielded it with casual precision. She was married to Hephaestus, the smith god, but loved Ares, and honestly a few others as well. Love in Greek mythology was never simple. It was a force of nature, beautiful and destructive in equal measure. Hephaestus was the god of fire and the forge. He was the only Olympian who was not conventionally beautiful. In some versions, he was lame, thrown from Olympus as a baby by Hera, who was ashamed of his appearance. He landed on the island of Lemnos, where he built his forge and became the greatest craftsman in existence. Every divine weapon, every magical artifact, every golden throne and bronze automaton came from his workshop. He was quiet, hard-working, and underestimated by everyone, which made it all the more satisfying when he built a golden net to catch Ares and Aphrodite together and displayed them for all of Olympus to see. Hermes was the messenger god, swift, clever, and just a little bit dishonest. He was the patron of travellers, thieves, merchants, and anyone who relied on their wits. He invented the lyre on the day he was born by stringing a tortoise shell with gut. He also stole Apollo cattle that same day because Hermes did not believe in wasting time. He wore winged sandals and a winged cap and carried the caduceus, a staff entwined with two serpents. He guided the souls of the dead to the underworld and delivered messages between the gods, always with a smile and usually with an agenda. Demeter was the goddess of the harvest, grain, and the fertility of the earth. She was warm, nurturing, and deeply connected to the cycles of planting and reaping. Her story is one of the most emotionally powerful in all of mythology, and we will come back to it soon, because it involves her daughter Persephone and the origin of the seasons. And then there was Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, theatre, and madness. He was the last Olympian to arrive, born from Zeus and a mortal woman named Semele. He travelled the world, spreading the knowledge of winemaking and attracting a following of ecstatic worshippers. He was joyful and terrifying in equal measure. His festivals were wild. His punishments for those who rejected him were severe. He represented the part of human nature that wants to let go, to dissolve boundaries, to lose yourself in music and drink and the company of others. For a god of parties, he had a surprisingly dark side. Those are the Olympians. 12 gods on a mountaintop, each one brilliant and flawed and absolutely certain they were right about everything. They bickered like a family at a holiday dinner. They held grudges for centuries. They fell in love with mortals and then forgot about them. They were, in many ways, a mirror of the people who worshipped them, just taller, more powerful, and much, much worse at apologizing. Now, before we move on to heroes and wars and wooden horses, let's take a quiet detour downward, beneath the earth, past the roots of the oldest mountains, past the places where even the worms do not go, down to the realm of Hades. The Greek underworld was not hell. It is important to understand that. It was not a place of punishment for sinners. It was simply where everyone went when they died. Good people, bad people. People who were just sort of average. Everyone ended up in the same place eventually, which is actually rather comforting if you think about it. No entrance exam, no judgment day, just a long, quiet walk downward. The journey started at the river Styx, the boundary between the living and the dead. The ferryman Charon would carry your soul across in his old wooden boat, but only if you had payment. A single coin, an obol, placed on the tongue or over the eyes of the dead at burial. If you could not pay, you waited on the shore. Some say you waited forever, drifting in the mist between worlds. Not alive, not properly dead, just lingering. On the far side of the Styx sat Cerberus, the three-headed dog. He was enormous, bristling, and surprisingly well behaved as long as you were going in the right direction. Getting into the underworld was easy. Cerberus let everyone in. Getting out again, that was the problem. Beyond Cerberus lay the Asphodel Meadows, where most souls ended up. It was not terrible. It was not wonderful. It was just there. A vast grey field where the shades of the ordinary dead drifted in a kind of permanent twilight, murmuring to themselves, slowly forgetting who they had been. Imagine a waiting room with no magazines, no clock, and no one to call your name. That was the Asphodel Meadows. Not cruel, just profoundly dull. For the truly virtuous there was Elysium, sometimes called the Elysian Fields, a place of gentle light and soft breezes and eternal peace. The heroes went there, the righteous went there. It was the closest thing the Greeks had to a heaven. Green meadows, cool shade, the sound of distant music. You could rest there. Really rest. Not the fitful, exhausted kind of rest, but the deep, soul-satisfying kind. The kind where you close your eyes and everything is finally, completely quiet. And for the truly wicked, there was Tartarus. The pit beneath the pit. A chasm so deep that an anvil dropped from the surface of the earth would fall for 9 days before hitting the bottom. Tartarus was where the worst offenders were kept. Sisyphus, who had cheated death twice, was condemned to roll a massive boulder up a hill for all eternity. Every time he neared the top, it would roll back down. Every single time. Forever. Tantalus, who had cooked his own son and served him to the gods, was placed in a pool of water beneath a fruit tree. Whenever he reached for the fruit, the branches pulled away. Whenever he bent to drink, the water receded. Eternally hungry, eternally thirsty, with relief always just out of reach. Hades himself was not evil. He was stern, fair, and deeply private. He did not seek worshippers. He did not crave attention. He simply did his job, which was running the largest and most efficiently organized realm in all of Greek mythology. Every soul that had ever existed passed through his domain. He kept track of them all. He was the universe bureaucrat, the eternal administrator of death. And unlike his brothers who were constantly chasing mortals and starting wars, Hades mostly just sat on his dark throne and did his paperwork. He loved Persephone in his own quiet way, and while the manner of their meeting was certainly not ideal, the Greeks generally portrayed their relationship as one of the more stable ones among the gods. They ruled the underworld together, two quiet figures in a vast, dark kingdom, surrounded by the endless murmur of the dead. It is a strange image, but there is something almost peaceful about it, a kingdom where nothing changes, where the noise of the living world cannot reach, where everything is still and the only sound is the soft lapping of the Styx against its banks. All right, let us come back up to the surface now. Take a breath. Feel the sun on your face, because we have heroes to meet. Now, while the gods were busy organizing the cosmos and arguing about who got the best temple, there was the matter of humans, mortals, those fragile little creatures who walked around on 2 legs and kept dying at inconvenient moments. According to some versions of the myth, it was the Titan Prometheus who created humanity. He shaped them from clay and water, molding them in the image of the gods. Other versions say humans just sort of appeared. Either way, Prometheus had a soft spot for them. He saw their potential, their cleverness, their stubbornness. He saw something worth protecting. The problem was that humans were cold, vulnerable, and eating raw meat, which is not great for civilization. They needed fire. But Zeus had forbidden it. Fire was a divine gift, reserved for the gods. Giving it to mortals would make them too powerful, too independent, too much like the gods themselves. Prometheus did not care. He climbed to the hearth of the gods, lit a fennel stalk from the divine flame, and carried it down to earth. He gave humanity fire. And with it came everything. Cooking, warmth, metalworking, pottery, light in the darkness, the ability to sit around a campfire and tell stories, which, if you think about it, is essentially what we are doing right now. Zeus was furious, not just because Prometheus had disobeyed him, but because he knew what fire meant. It meant progress. It meant that humans would grow and build and eventually start asking uncomfortable questions about the gods. So Zeus punished Prometheus in the most spectacular way he could think of. He chained Prometheus to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains. Every day a great eagle would swoop down and eat his liver. Every night, because Prometheus was immortal, the liver would grow back. And every morning, the eagle would return, day after day, year after year, century after century, an eternity of torment for the crime of compassion. Prometheus endured. He did not beg. He did not regret. He bore his punishment with a quiet defiance that made even the other gods uncomfortable. Eventually, many ages later, Heracles would come along and free him. But that is a story for later. Zeus was not done punishing humanity either. If Prometheus had given them fire, Zeus would give them something else. Something that looked beautiful on the outside but carried ruin within. He ordered Hephaestus to craft a woman from clay. Each god contributed a gift. Athena dressed her in fine clothes. Aphrodite gave her grace and beauty. Hermes gave her a cunning mind and a curious nature. They named her Pandora, meaning all gifts. Then Zeus gave Pandora a large jar. Some translations call it a box, but the original Greek says jar. He told her never to open it. And then, with a perfectly straight face, he sent her down to earth, knowing full well that he had specifically designed her to be curious. Pandora was given to Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus. Now Prometheus had warned his brother never to accept gifts from Zeus. But Epimetheus, whose name literally means afterthought, took one look at Pandora and forgot every warning he had ever received. They married. They were happy. For a while. But the jar sat in the corner of their home, and every day Pandora wondered what was inside. The curiosity was unbearable. It gnawed at her. It whispered. And one day, she opened it. Out flew every misery known to humanity. Disease, poverty, envy, greed, pain, suffering, war, cruelty, old age, despair. They scattered across the world like a swarm of invisible wasps and embedded themselves into the human condition forever. Pandora slammed the lid shut in horror, but it was too late. Almost everything had escaped. Almost, because at the very bottom of the jar, one thing remained. Hope. Small, fragile, glowing faintly in the dark. Hope stayed behind. And whether that was a mercy or one final cruelty from Zeus depends entirely on how you look at it. The ancient Greeks spent a lot of time debating that question. And honestly, so do we. Time passed. Humanity spread across the earth. They built cities. They planted crops. They invented politics, which the gods probably regretted. And as humans grew more numerous, they also grew more arrogant, more violent, and more disrespectful to the gods. Zeus looked down from Olympus and did not like what he saw. He decided to wipe them out. All of them. He would send a great flood to cover the earth and wash away every mortal life. But Prometheus, even while chained to his rock, managed to send a warning to his son Deucalion. Build a chest. A great wooden chest. Stock it with provisions. When the rains come, climb inside with your wife Pyrrha and hold on. Deucalion did as his father instructed, and when Zeus opened the heavens, the rain fell for 9 days and 9 nights. Rivers swelled, seas rose, mountains disappeared beneath the water. Every city, every farm, every person was swallowed by the flood. The entire world became an ocean. When the waters finally receded, Deucalion and Pyrrha found themselves alone on the peak of Mount Parnassus. The only 2 people left alive. The silence must have been extraordinary. No voices, no laughter. No children playing. Just wind and water and the slow drip of a world drying out. They prayed to the gods for guidance. An oracle told them to throw the bones of their mother over their shoulders. At first they were confused and disturbed. But then they realized the oracle meant Gaia, the earth. Their mother was the earth, and her bones were stones. So they walked across the barren land, picking up stones and throwing them behind them. The stones Deucalion threw became men. The stones Pyrrha threw became women. Slowly, awkwardly, humanity was reborn. Not from divine clay this time, but from the bones of the earth itself. Which is why the Greeks sometimes said that people are stubborn and hard-headed. They are literally made of rocks. Of all the stories in Greek mythology, this one might be the most human. It is a story about a mother and a daughter, about loss and longing, and the quiet devastation of watching someone you love disappear. Persephone was the daughter of Demeter and Zeus. She was young and beautiful, and she spent her days gathering flowers in the meadows of Sicily. One day she wandered away from her companions and found a narcissus flower, impossibly beautiful, growing alone in a field. She reached down to pick it. The earth split open. A golden chariot burst from the ground, drawn by black horses. Hades, lord of the underworld, seized Persephone and dragged her down into darkness. The earth closed above them, and just like that, she was gone. Demeter heard her daughter scream. She searched everywhere. She wandered the earth for 9 days and 9 nights without eating or sleeping, carrying burning torches, calling Persephone name. No one would tell her what had happened. The sun god Helios finally revealed the truth. Hades had taken her, and Zeus had allowed it. Demeter was shattered, and in her grief, she did the only thing she could. She stopped. She stopped making the crops grow. She stopped blessing the fields. The earth turned cold and barren. Leaves fell from the trees. Flowers withered. Nothing grew. Famine spread across the world. Mortals began to starve, and Demeter did not care. She sat in disguise at Eleusis, a broken mother, and refused to let anything live until her daughter was returned. Zeus realized this could not continue. If all the mortals died, there would be no one left to worship the gods. He sent Hermes down to the underworld to negotiate. Hades agreed to let Persephone go. But before she left, he offered her a pomegranate. She ate 6 seeds, just 6 tiny seeds. In the laws of the underworld, anyone who ate the food of the dead was bound to return. Because Persephone had eaten 6 seeds, she would spend 6 months of every year in the underworld with Hades, and 6 months above ground with her mother. When Persephone returned to the surface, Demeter wept with joy. The earth bloomed, flowers burst from the soil, trees grew heavy with fruit, warmth returned. But when the time came for Persephone to descend again, Demeter mourned, the leaves fell, the cold returned, the world grew still and silent. And that, the Greeks said, is why we have seasons. Spring and summer are Demeter rejoicing, autumn and winter are Demeter grieving. The whole world breathes in rhythm with a mother's love. Let us talk about heroes now, because Greek mythology is full of them. Brave, flawed, occasionally dim-witted men and women who performed incredible feats and usually died in ironic ways. Perseus was one of the earliest. He was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Danae. His grandfather, King Acrisius of Argos, had received a prophecy that his grandson would kill him. So naturally, he locked his daughter in a bronze tower. Zeus, being Zeus, turned himself into a shower of golden light and visited her anyway. Perseus was born. Acrisius, panicking, put mother and baby in a wooden chest and threw them into the sea. They washed up on the island of Seriphos, where they were taken in by a kind fisherman named Dictys. Perseus grew up strong and brave. The local king, Polydectes, wanted to marry Danae, but Perseus stood in his way. So Polydectes came up with a plan. He sent Perseus on an impossible quest. Bring me the head of Medusa. Medusa was one of 3 Gorgon sisters. She had snakes for hair, bronze hands, and a face so terrible that anyone who looked directly at her turned to stone. Not a great first date, but the gods helped Perseus. Athena gave him a polished bronze shield to use as a mirror. Hermes gave him winged sandals and a curved sword. The nymphs provided a magic bag to carry the head and the helm of darkness from Hades. Perseus flew across the world to the edge of the ocean where the Gorgons lived. He approached Medusa while she slept, looking only at her reflection in his shield. With one swing of his sword, he severed her head. From her neck sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a giant with a golden sword. Greek biology was creative if nothing else. On his way home, Perseus spotted a woman chained to a rock by the sea. This was Andromeda, a princess whose mother had foolishly boasted that her daughter was more beautiful than the sea nymphs. Poseidon had sent a sea monster to punish the kingdom, and Andromeda had been offered as a sacrifice. Perseus, still carrying Medusa's head in a bag, swooped down on his winged sandals, killed the sea monster, and freed Andromeda. They fell in love and married, which is actually one of the few straightforwardly romantic endings in Greek mythology, so let's enjoy it. He returned to Seriphos, turned the wicked king Polydectes to stone with Medusa's head, and freed his mother. Later, at an athletic competition, Perseus threw a discus that veered off course and struck an old man in the crowd. That old man was his grandfather Acrisius, the prophecy fulfilled. You really cannot escape fate in Greek mythology. You can run from it, hide from it, lock your daughter in a bronze tower, but fate just puts on its sandals and jogs after you at a comfortable pace. If Perseus was the warm-up hero, Heracles was the main event, the strongest mortal who ever lived, son of Zeus and a human woman named Alcmene, and the single most put-upon individual in the history of mythology. Hera hated Heracles from the moment he was born because he was living proof of her husband's infidelity. She sent 2 serpents to kill him in his crib. Baby Heracles strangled them both with his bare hands. He was that kind of baby. He grew up to be impossibly strong, a gifted warrior, and not particularly bright. He married a woman named Megara and had children. Life was good. And then Hera struck. She sent a madness upon him, and in his frenzy Heracles killed his own wife and children. When the madness lifted and he realized what he had done, his grief was total. To atone, the oracle at Delphi told him to serve King Eurystheus of Tiryns and complete whatever tasks were set before him. These became the 12 labours. Each one was supposed to be impossible. Each one nearly killed him. and each one he completed through a combination of brute strength, occasional cleverness, and sheer stubbornness. He killed the Nemean lion whose hide could not be pierced by any weapon. He strangled it and wore its skin as armor. He slew the Lernaean hydra, a serpent with 9 heads that grew 2 more each time one was cut off. He captured the golden hind of Artemis, a deer with golden antlers that could outrun an arrow. He trapped the Erymanthian boar in deep snow. He cleaned the Orsian stables, which had not been cleaned in 30 years and held thousands of cattle, by diverting 2 rivers through them, which is honestly the most satisfying of all the labours because it is basically a plumbing job on a mythic scale. He drove away the Stymphalian birds, man-eating creatures with bronze beaks. He captured the Cretan bull. He stole the man-eating mares of Diomedes. He obtained the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. He rustled the cattle of the monster Geryon. He retrieved the golden apples of the Hesperides. And finally, in his most dangerous labour, he descended into the underworld and brought back Cerberus, the 3-headed dog that guarded the gates of Hades, alive. 12 labours, years of suffering, and at the end of it all, Heracles was free. But his life did not get much easier. He had more adventures, more tragedies, more impossible situations. Eventually he died when his wife accidentally poisoned him with a shirt soaked in the blood of a centaur. Yes, really. A poisoned shirt. The strongest man in the world, brought down by laundry. But Zeus took pity on his son and raised him to Olympus, where he became immortal at last. He married Hebe, the goddess of youth, and finally found peace. It only took an entire lifetime of suffering to get there. Every year, the city of Athens was forced to send 7 young men and 7 young women to the island of Crete as a tribute to King Minos. These 14 youths were fed to the Minotaur, a monstrous creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, who lived in a vast underground maze called the Labyrinth, designed by the brilliant inventor Daedalus. The Minotaur was the result of another divine punishment. Minos had prayed to Poseidon for a beautiful bull to sacrifice, but then refused to sacrifice it because it was too magnificent. Poseidon in return made Minos' wife Pasiphae fall in love with the bull, and the resulting offspring was the Minotaur. Greek myths have a way of escalating very quickly. Theseus, Prince of Athens, volunteered to be one of the 14. He sailed to Crete with the intention of killing the Minotaur and ending the tribute forever. When he arrived, Minos' daughter Ariadne saw him and fell in love. She gave him a ball of thread to unravel as he entered the labyrinth so he could find his way back out. Theseus entered the maze. The corridors were dark, twisting, and disorienting. Somewhere in the depths, the Minotaur waited. When they met, the battle was fierce, but Theseus was strong and determined. He killed the beast with his bare hands, or a sword, or a club, depending on who is telling the story. Then he followed the thread back out, collected his companions and Ariadne, and fled Crete. On the way home, he stopped at the island of Naxos, and here the story takes a turn. Theseus abandoned Ariadne. He just left her there, sleeping on the beach. The reasons vary. Some say a god told him to. Some say he simply forgot. Some say he was just not a very good person. Whatever the case, Ariadne woke up alone on a strange island and wept. But the god Dionysus found her there. He fell in love with her, married her, and gave her a crown of stars. So at least someone in this story got a happy ending. Theseus sailed home but forgot to change his black sails to white ones, which was the signal to his father King Aegeus that he had survived. Aegeus saw the black sails from the cliffs, believed his son was dead, and threw himself into the sea. That sea was named the Aegean after him. Theseus became king of Athens. He united the scattered villages of Attica into one city-state. He was celebrated as a hero and a founder. But his personal life remained a mess of abandoned women, broken promises, and unfortunate misunderstandings. Which I suppose is the Greek way of saying that being a hero does not make you a good person. Jason was a prince who had been cheated out of his throne by his uncle Peleus. When Jason came of age and demanded his kingdom back, Peleus offered a deal. Bring me the golden fleece and the throne is yours. The golden fleece was the skin of a magical golden ram, hung in a sacred grove in the distant land of Colchis at the far end of the Black Sea. It was guarded by a dragon that never slept. In other words, Peleus was sending Jason on a suicide mission with a smile. But Jason did not go alone. He assembled the greatest crew in mythological history, the Argonauts, named after their ship the Argo. Among them were Heracles, Orpheus the musician, Castor and Pollux the twin warriors, Atalanta the huntress, and dozens of other heroes. It was like an ancient Greek all-star team. Their voyage was long and full of wonders and dangers. They passed through the clashing rocks, two massive boulders that smashed together to crush any ship that tried to pass between them. They encountered the harpies tormenting a blind prophet. They resisted the song of the sirens thanks to Orpheus playing his lyre even louder and more beautifully. When they finally reached Colchis, King Aeetes set Jason a series of impossible tasks. Yoke 2 fire-breathing bulls, plough a field with them, sow the field with dragon teeth and fight the army of warriors that would spring from the earth. Oh, and then get past the sleepless dragon. But Aeetes' daughter Medea, a powerful sorceress, fell in love with Jason. She gave him a magical ointment that protected him from fire. She told him how to defeat the earthborn warriors by throwing a stone among them so they would turn on each other. And she put the dragon to sleep with her sorcery so Jason could take the fleece. They fled Colchis together. Jason returned home, claimed his throne, and married Medea. For a while they were happy, but then Jason, in a move of staggering foolishness, decided to leave Medea for a younger princess. Medea, who had betrayed her own family for him, who had killed for him, who had given up everything for him, did not take this well. She sent the new bride a poisoned dress that burned her alive. Then she killed her own children by Jason. Then she flew away on a chariot pulled by dragons. The moral of this story is do not betray a sorceress. Actually, the moral of this story is do not betray anyone, but especially not a sorceress with a dragon chariot. And now we come to the big one, the story that consumed the ancient Greek imagination more than any other. The war that launched 1,000 ships and burned the topless towers of Ilium. The Trojan War. It started, as so many catastrophes do, with a party. The gods held a great feast to celebrate the marriage of Peleus and Thetis, a mortal king and a sea goddess. Every god and goddess was invited, except one. Eris, the goddess of discord, was left off the guest list because nobody wants the goddess of discord at their wedding reception. Eris showed up anyway. She tossed a golden apple into the middle of the celebration. On it were inscribed 3 words, for the fairest. 3 goddesses claimed it: Hera, Athena, Aphrodite. None would yield. They demanded a judge. Zeus wisely refused to get involved and instead directed them to a young Trojan prince named Paris, who was tending sheep on Mount Ida, because apparently the best person to judge a divine beauty contest is a teenager with a flock of sheep. Each goddess offered Paris a bribe. Hera offered him power and dominion over all of Asia. Athena offered wisdom and victory in battle. Aphrodite offered him the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite. And the most beautiful woman in the world was Helen, Queen of Sparta, wife of King Menelaus. Paris sailed to Sparta, was welcomed as a guest, and then ran off with Helen. Whether she went willingly or was taken by force depends on who is telling the story. Either way, she was gone, and Menelaus was furious. But here is the thing. Before Helen had married Menelaus, all the kings and princes of Greece had courted her. Her father, worried about the political fallout of choosing one suitor over the others, had made them all swear an oath. If anyone ever threatened Helen or her marriage, every suitor would come to her defense. Menelaus called in the oath. Every king in Greece was bound to honor it. And so the greatest military expedition the ancient world had ever seen was assembled. Over 1,000 ships, tens of thousands of warriors. Led by Menelaus' brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, they sailed for Troy, and they would not come home for 10 years. Among the heroes gathered at the port of Aulis were names that would echo forever. There was Achilles, barely more than a boy, already the greatest warrior of his generation. His mother Thetis had tried to hide him among women on the island of Skyros to keep him from the war, because she knew a prophecy. If Achilles went to Troy, he would win eternal glory but die young. If he stayed home, he would live a long, quiet life and be forgotten. Achilles chose glory, which tells you everything you need to know about Greek heroes. There was Odysseus, king of Ithaca, who had tried to avoid the war by pretending to be mad. When the recruiters came, he was ploughing his fields with salt, sowing his furrows with nothing, acting as if he had lost his mind. But one of them placed his infant son Telemachus in the path of the plough. Odysseus swerved to avoid his child, proving he was sane. He was drafted on the spot. He never forgave them for that trick. There was Ajax, a giant of a man who carried a shield the size of a wall. There was Diomedes, fearless enough to wound Ares himself in battle. There was old Nestor, who was too ancient to fight effectively but talked so much and so well that no one dared leave him behind. And there was Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, commander of the whole expedition, who was powerful and proud, and not particularly likable but had the biggest army, so everyone followed him anyway. Even getting to Troy was a trial. The fleet was becalmed at Aulis. No wind. The ships sat motionless in the harbour for weeks. The seer Calchas declared that Artemis was offended and demanded a sacrifice, not an animal, a human. Agamemnon owned daughter Iphigenia. He lured her to Aulis under the pretense of marrying her to Achilles. Then he sacrificed her on the altar. The wind came. The ships sailed. But Agamemnon's wife Clytemnestra would never forget, and she would be waiting for him when he came home. Troy was a mighty city on the coast of what is now Turkey. Its walls were built by Poseidon and Apollo, and they were virtually impregnable. For 9 years the Greeks besieged the city without being able to break through. 9 years of fighting in the plains before the walls. 9 years of raids on neighbouring towns for supplies. 9 years of frustration, disease, homesickness, and slowly growing madness. Among the Greek heroes was Achilles, the greatest warrior alive. He was the son of Thetis, the sea goddess from that ill-fated wedding. When he was a baby, Thetis had dipped him in the river Styx to make him invulnerable. She held him by his heel, which remained the one spot on his body that could be harmed. Hence the term Achilles' heel, which now means a hidden weakness, even though the ancient Greeks probably did not think much about foot injuries until it was too late. Achilles was fast, fearless, and had a temper that made Zeus look patient. In the 10th year of the war, he quarrelled bitterly with Agamemnon over a captive woman. Achilles withdrew from battle and sulked in his tent. Without him, the Greeks began to lose. The Trojans pushed them back to their ships. The Trojan champion was Hector, son of King Priam. Hector was brave, noble, a loving husband and father, and the one person holding Troy together. He fought with honour and defended his city with everything he had. In almost any other story he would be the hero, but war does not care about who deserves to win. When the Trojans began to burn the Greek ships, Achilles' best friend Patroclus begged to join the fight. Achilles let him go wearing his own armour. Patroclus fought brilliantly, driving the Trojans back. But then he went too far. He pursued them to the walls of Troy, and there Hector killed him. Achilles' grief was apocalyptic. He screamed so loudly the Trojans heard him from inside the walls. He had new armour forged by Hephaestus himself, divine armour decorated with the entire cosmos. And then he returned to battle with one purpose: kill Hector. He chased Hector 3 times around the walls of Troy. Imagine that. 2 men running around a city while 2 armies watch. Hector finally stopped and faced Achilles. The duel was short. Achilles drove his spear through Hector's throat. Then, still consumed by rage and grief, he tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it around the walls of Troy for days. Eventually old King Priam came alone to Achilles' tent at night. He knelt before the man who had killed his son and begged for Hector's body. And in one of the most profoundly human moments in all of literature, Achilles wept with him. 2 men on opposite sides of a war, both broken by loss, sharing a moment of raw, unguarded grief. Achilles returned the body. The war continued. Achilles himself was killed by an arrow to the heel, guided by Apollo and shot by Paris of all people. The greatest warrior, brought down by the least impressive prince with help from a petty god. There is a lesson in there somewhere. After 10 years of fighting, the Greeks finally won, not through strength, but through cunning. The plan came from Odysseus, king of Ithaca, the cleverest man in the Greek army. The Greeks built a massive wooden horse, hollow on the inside, large enough to hold a team of soldiers. They left it on the beach outside Troy as an apparent offering to the gods. Then they burned their camp and sailed away, hiding their fleet behind a nearby island. The Trojans woke to find the enemy gone and a giant horse sitting outside their walls. There was debate about what to do. The priest Laocoon warned them. He said, "Do not trust the Greeks even when they bring gifts." But Athena, who supported the Greeks, sent 2 sea serpents to kill Laocoon and his sons. The Trojans took this as a sign that the horse was sacred. They dragged it inside the city. They celebrated. They drank. They danced. They fell asleep. And in the dead of night, the Greek soldiers hidden inside the horse crept out. They opened the gates. The Greek army, which had sailed back under cover of darkness, poured in. Troy burned. The city that had withstood 10 years of siege fell in a single night. King Priam was killed at his own altar. Hector, infant son, was thrown from the walls. The women were enslaved. The temples were looted and desecrated. It was total, merciless destruction. The gods watched, some in satisfaction, some in horror, and some were already planning the punishments they would inflict on the victorious Greeks for their crimes during the sacking. Because in Greek mythology, winning a war does not mean you win the peace. Of all the Greeks who sailed home from Troy, none had a harder journey than Odysseus. It took him 10 years. 10 years to travel a distance that should have taken weeks. The gods were not kind to him. His first misadventure was on the island of the Cyclops. He and his men were trapped in the cave of Polyphemus, a one-eyed giant and son of Poseidon. Polyphemus ate several of Odysseus' men before the hero devised a plan. He got the Cyclops drunk on wine, told him his name was Nobody, and then drove a sharpened stake into his single eye while he slept. When Polyphemus screamed for help, his neighbours asked who was hurting him. "Nobody," he answered, and they went away. Clever. But Odysseus made a fatal mistake. As he sailed away, he shouted his real name back at the blinded giant. Polyphemus prayed to his father Poseidon, and Poseidon, god of the sea, spent the next decade making sure Odysseus could not cross it. He encountered Aeolus, keeper of the winds, who gave him a bag containing all the winds that would blow him off course. His men, thinking it was treasure, opened the bag while Odysseus slept. They were blown back across the entire ocean. He lost most of his fleet to the Laestrygonians, giant cannibals who smashed his ships with boulders. He landed on the island of the enchantress Circe, who turned his men into pigs. He sailed to the edge of the underworld and spoke with the ghosts of the dead, including Achilles, who told him that even glory is cold comfort in the land of the dead. He navigated past the sirens, whose beautiful songs lured sailors to their deaths on the rocks. He had his men plug their ears with wax and tie him to the mast so he could hear the song without being drawn to it. He squeezed his ship between Scylla, a 6-headed monster, and Charybdis, a great whirlpool, losing 6 men in the process. He was shipwrecked alone on the island of Calypso, a goddess who lived in a cave draped with grapevines and surrounded by meadows of violet and wild celery. She loved Odysseus. She offered him immortality. She offered him eternal youth and an eternity of comfort by her side. All he had to do was stay. All he had to do was forget. But Odysseus sat on the shore every day and wept. He looked out at the sea, the same sea that had tried to kill him 100 times, and he longed for it. Not for the sea itself, but for what lay beyond it. Home. Ithaca. His wife. His son. His old dog. His rocky little island that was not beautiful or grand but was his. 7 years he sat on that shore and wept. 7 years of paradise that felt like prison because it was not where he belonged. Eventually the gods intervened. Athena pleaded with Zeus. Hermes was sent to Calypso with orders to release Odysseus. Calypso was heartbroken, but she obeyed. She helped Odysseus build a raft and gave him provisions and sent him out across the wine-dark sea one last time. Poseidon wrecked his raft almost immediately because Poseidon had not forgotten, and Poseidon does not forgive. Odysseus washed up naked and exhausted on the shore of the Phaeacians, a gentle, seafaring people who fed him, clothed him, and listened to his story. He told them everything: the Cyclops, the witch, the dead, the monsters, the goddess. All of it poured out of him like water from a broken jar, and when he was done they gave him a ship and sailed him home to Ithaca. He arrived in the middle of the night. Athena disguised him as an old beggar so he would not be recognized. He made his way to his own farm where an old swineherd named Eumaeus took him in, not knowing who he was, simply because it was the right thing to do. Hospitality, the same ancient law that ran through all of Greek life. You feed the stranger, you give him shelter, you do not ask questions until the morning. Odysseus revealed himself to his son Telemachus, who was now a young man. Together they planned the destruction of the suitors, over 100 arrogant men who had been eating Odysseus' food, drinking his wine, harassing his wife, and plotting to kill his son. For 3 years Penelope had kept them at bay with a trick. She told them she would choose a new husband when she finished weaving a burial shroud for Odysseus' father. Every day she wove. Every night she unravelled her work, a masterpiece of patience and deception. She was her husband match in cleverness, if not in fame. When the day of reckoning came, Penelope set a challenge. She brought out Odysseus' great bow and told the suitors that whoever could string it and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads would win her hand. One by one they tried. One by one they failed. They did not have the strength. They did not have the skill. And then the old beggar asked for a turn. He strung the bow with ease. The room went quiet. He shot the arrow clean through all 12 axe heads, and then he turned the bow on the suitors. With Telemachus at his side and Athena guiding his hand, Odysseus killed them all. The hall ran red. The usurpers fell. And Odysseus stood in his own home again for the first time in 20 years. Penelope, cautious and wise, tested him one last time before accepting that her husband had truly returned. She told a servant to move their marriage bed. Odysseus protested that this was impossible because he had built the bed himself around a living olive tree rooted in the earth. It could not be moved. Only the real Odysseus would know that. She wept. He wept. They held each other. And the story says that Athena held back the dawn so that the night would last a little longer for them, so that for a few more hours, nothing else existed except the two of them together in their home. That might be the most generous thing any god ever did in all of Greek mythology, and it is a fitting place to let the great stories begin to rest. And so the age of heroes slowly faded. The great warriors of the Trojan War either died in the fighting or met strange and often unhappy ends on their journeys home. Agamemnon returned to Mycenae and was murdered by his wife Clytemnestra, who had never forgiven him for sacrificing their daughter Iphigenia to gain favourable winds for the voyage to Troy. His son Orestes would later avenge him, killing his own mother and being pursued by the Furies until Athena herself intervened and established the first court of law in Athens to try his case. Justice, the Greeks decided, should not be a matter of blood feuds. It should be a matter of reason, a radical idea for a civilization that had spent most of its mythology stabbing each other. Ajax went mad and took his own life after losing a dispute over Achilles' armour. The lesser heroes scattered across the Mediterranean, founding cities in Italy and North Africa and the islands of the Western Sea. Aeneas, a Trojan prince and son of Aphrodite, escaped the burning city carrying his elderly father on his back and leading his young son by the hand. He would eventually reach Italy, and his descendants, the Romans said, would found Rome, and so the end of one civilization became the beginning of another. Stories have a way of doing that. The gods continued. They would always continue. Up on Olympus the sun still rose and set, pulled by Apollo, golden chariot across the sky. The seasons turned because Demeter still wept for her daughter every autumn and rejoiced every spring. The sea still raged when Poseidon was angry and calmed when he was pleased. Lovers still fell into impossible situations because Aphrodite thought it was amusing. Hermes still darted between worlds carrying messages. Hephaestus still hammered at his forge. And Zeus still sat on his throne, watching, judging, occasionally throwing a thunderbolt when he felt someone needed reminding who was in charge. But the world grew quieter. The monsters were mostly slain. The great quests were mostly complete. And now I think it is time to rest. Let the stories settle. Let them drift into your mind like snow falling on a quiet field, soft and slow and steady. They will be there in the morning. They always are. They have survived 3,000 years. They can survive one more night. Close your eyes, breathe slowly. Let Hypnos do his work. Good night.